So another training on Sutro, brought to you by Space Coast Pool School. A little bit about me. I'm Space Coast Pool School. I'm the instructor, the only instructor for Space Coast Pool School at this time, Lauren Broom. I offer certified pool operator courses in person in Florida, private classes as well. I offer 100% virtual CPO classes, certified pool operator courses. So 100% virtual 2-day or the fusion option, which ends up being a self-paced course and then a live Zoom review session, and your test is taken online as well on that same day. So if you're interested in CPO classes at all, you can go to my website, spacecoastpoolschool.com, or you can contact me at 321-726-8509. I do six or more people private virtual classes as well. So if you have a company and you got 6 people, let's talk about dates and we can put it on the calendar and we can get something scheduled for 6 or more. So now I'm going to pass it off to our main presenters that I'm going to introduce here. We've got Jim Conti, who's the Fractional Chief Sales Officer for Sutro, and Ravi Karani, who is the founder of Sutro. Thank you guys for being here today. We scheduled this a while ago. So thank you for being with us. So Jim, I think you were going to tell us a little bit about Sutro and a little background. So it's all yours, guys.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, thank you, Lauren. It's we did schedule this a while ago, but as we all know in this crazy pool business, getting anybody on the phone at this point, unless you're selling 3-inch trichlor tabs, I don't think a lot of folks are going to take your call at this point, right? So thank you. This is like I said, a very interesting time in the pool industry, and especially this past year. And what's really exciting is that when you try to bring a new technology like Sutro to the market during times like this, you know, you've got the better solution, or you have a solution that can help folks manage these times. And actually, this is when technology can be relied on to fill in some of the blanks and provide some things that were not available when you may have had a full staff or you may have been doing things differently. So I'm very excited. I joined Sutro, and when I joined, it is a disruptive technology in the pool world, which again is almost a 4-letter word sometimes when you try to bring in something that's breaking the paradigm of the way people have done it for years and years. And, you know, I always hear that my father did it, my grandfather did it that way. And, you know, sometimes when you try to show it to them, they're very reluctant. But I think we're starting to see a lot more adoption of technology, and a lot of exciting things are coming to the pool industry. So I am very excited. I met Ravi several years ago and saw what he had and said, you know, this is really groundbreaking. And he's taken this technology from, you know, early day prototypes to full commercial realization. And it's a work in progress, and things continue to grow. And with the feedback we're getting from our partners, we're excited to see what 2022 is going to bring. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce Ravi and let him walk you through the technology, show you what he's done and how we can apply it to the various channels within the pool industry. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ravi Karani, founder of Sutro.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jim. And Lauren, it's really a pleasure to be here. I know it has been a while that we've been trying to get this scheduled, so I'm glad that we finally were able to do a Facebook Live. And whoever's out there in Facebook land, and hopefully you guys can catch this video when it's actually been posted up on YouTube or on the next podcast that you actually have, Lauren.
Well, we got one hi already on Facebook Live from somebody in England. His name is Dean Bolton.
Wow. Hello all the way to England from San Francisco, California. So
right.
Let me go ahead.
You can now say you're international, Ravi, which is really good.
Lauren, actually, if you can activate screen sharing, I'm going to go ahead and share a little presentation that I put together for this.
There we go.
Perfect. There we go. Can everybody see that right over there, Lauren and Jim? Perfect. So today we're going to be doing the live training with Lauren Broom. And as you guys are all familiar with, I'm just going to jump into it. This is the common technology that we see in the pool industry today, right? We have these ORP or pH glass bulb sensors is what they're called from kind of a physics and a science standpoint. The reason that they're a glass bulb is if you ever kind of screwed one apart and seen them from the bottom, you notice that there's a little glass inside there, and it has a little bit of liquid. And that liquid is basically how the instrument will measure what the pH is, or what a common measurement in the space is called ORP, right? The pH or the ORP. And ORP stands for oxidation reduction potential. In kind of very lay terms, what's actually being measured here is basically a millivolt signal or some sort of an electrical signal. And the problem that have is that they're great, but they just slightly miss the mark, right? And the reason that they miss the mark is because they tend to drift and they need to be calibrated over time. And so what I've done over here is kind of brought down a quick little chart of what you know if the ORP pH probe can actually measure it and how it measures it. So what we know is pH, right? pH is usually measured with phenol red. You either have that on a test strip, or you take a spectrophotometer or some sort of a liquid reagent to measure with the phenol red, and the pH will turn a red color. The pH probe generally does that pretty well, and actually in scientific settings, at a lot of laboratory settings, you'll see that the pH probe is commonly used by scientists, except for that they usually calibrate them 2 to 3 times a day. We do in our lab, and we relatively and very regularly calibrate these sensors because they're extremely accurate, but as I mentioned up on top, they drift and they need to be calibrated. The second one on here is free chlorine. We're used to measuring free chlorine with either DPD or an OTO sort of test, and that using a liquid reagent, you'll put inside of the liquid the test sample, and it basically measures the oxidation potential, right? You'll see the color move into a yellow sort of territory, which will tell you what your chlorine residual is inside of your water. This is where the ORP and pH probe slightly starts to break down now, right? You're used to seeing pH with pH, and then DPD, you end up with this weird millivolt value, right? The 650 millivolt is good, anything underneath that's not. This is where end users or people that come into a pool store, people that are speaking to a pool service technician, the homeowner gets a bit confused because they're like, well, it's 650, but I'm supposed to be at 2 ppm. The language doesn't really make sense. And then where this really starts to break down is when you start measuring alkalinity, right? Alkalinity is measured off of a titration. You need to measure that over milligrams over calcium carbonate. And with a solid state glass bulb sensor, which is what these sensors are, it's just not possible, because the way that we run alkalinity measurements as we know today is typically run through a titration, right? You put a little bit of liquid inside and you titrate and you count the number of drops, and after so many drops, 8 drops, 6 drops, you have a ppm value. The ppm value is nothing more than the milligrams of calcium carbonate. So what Sutro does is we can do all 3 of these, and we do them the same way that you do them inside of your house or your commercial operation when you use liquid reagents, which is how you're supposed to test your water. And how do we do this? We stuck with what you know and what's tried and true, the Reagent Test Kit. Every single one of you have this Taylor test kit, a Lamont test kit, and this is the way that we've been measuring water chemistry for the last 100 years. And it is the way that we're still measuring it today. It's the only effective and accurate way to measure water chemistry as long as your reagents are still good. Right now, if your reagents are bad, you're leaving them inside your pickup truck, they get a bunch of sunlight on them, all of you all know what kind of bad reagents look like. And so what we did was we took this reagent test kit and we just made it really, 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 really small. And we shoved it inside of this robot that is the Sutro. And I'll kind of show you how that works in just a quick second, actually. So this is the Sutro. You guys, if you order it, you will get a box that looks like this. And inside of the box, let me go ahead and actually just stop sharing my screen. Okay, so this is the box that you get when you actually order the Sutro. Inside of this box, you have the Sutro monitor that's on the top. Over here, you have the Sutro test cartridge. This is the hub that communicates with the Sutro. And this is the accessories box that has the batteries and your power adapter that's inside there. So just looking at the Sutro, this is about how tall it is. It's about the kind of length of a forearm right over here. And if you open it up, It opens up like this. By the way, we're really big Back to the Future fans. So this was actually inspired by the flux capacitor, which is why we have this design. And what you see inside here is the reagent test cartridge. What I'm about to show you in a second is kind of how the reagent test cartridge works. So let me go back to sharing my screen. Perfect. So what I just showed you over there was the Sutro monitor. And this over here is the top of what's on this Sutro test cartridge. So this is the microfluidic chip, which is this piece that actually nests right on top of the Sutro test cartridge. Why is this microfluidic chip important? Because first of all, the actual flow cell, which I'll explain in a second, is about the size of the tip of an eraser of a pencil. And what does that mean? Is we've proportionally taken the size of your reagent test kit that you have, that's a tailored test kit, the size of your finger, and we basically turned something that's the size of your finger down to the size of your fingernail. So we've had about 1/50th of a drop of reagent to about 200 drops of water. That's our sample size. That's the sample size that we use to actually measure water chemistry inside of the Sutro device. And the way that that works is at the bottom over here, you can notice that there's 5 reagent syringes that are inside there. This middle one you might recognize. That's your phenol red. That's literally the same phenol red that you use inside of your test kit to measure your pH of your actual water chemistry. These 2 over here is your DPD, and this one over here is your alkalinity. This is how Sutro can measure the 3 parameters using liquid reagents through a chromatography, which is basically using the actual colors of the reagents against the water inside of the Sutro device. And so basically what the Sutro is just a really, really miniature chemical test kit that utilizes computer vision to measure the actual colors as you would measure the colors with your own human eye when you're running the actual test against your pool.
What's the one on the right do, the 5th one?
The 5th one is the alkalinity titrant. And so that's what actually drips into there to actually count the number of drops that we're putting inside there. That's how we're actually able to get you a true milligrams over calcium carbonate, a ppm of alkalinity. And so this is just the cartridge taken apart. You can see here there's the syringes. And we have an entire cartridge filling process that holds the quality to make sure that the actual reagents are fresh and that they arrive at your doorstep with the kind of least amount of time on the road and the least amount of time inside of hot temperatures, which will affect the reagent chemistry, as many of you guys know out there. So what are we trying to build at Sutro, right? If you zoom out to the 50,000 foot level, we're not just building a widget. We're not a piece of plastic that you throw inside your swimming pool. Also, this wasn't, envisioned by me just sitting inside of a backyard staring at my pool, hoping that I could, take Silicon Valley and crash it together with some sort of industry. My background is in the pool industry. My dad used to own a chain of pool and spa supply stores down in Southern California. I've done everything from run acid washes to test people's pool water at my dad's pool and spa supply store to run routes. We had 100 pools in Huntington Beach, California. And so I've done everything in the above, and this technology comes from a place of being from the pool industry, running in the pool industry, and understanding water chemistry. That's kind of the 3 main verticals that this is coming from. So what are we doing? Over here, you see that we have the Sutro device, and that floats inside the swimming pool, right? The swimming pool is at the center of our ecosystem. The pool owner and the homeowner is the people that own the pools, right? They're the ones that these devices are sitting inside. What we want to do after that is we can actually surface up all that information to a distribution company. If you can imagine there's, 1 million Sutros floating in 1 million pools across the US, we can begin to understand analytics of water chemistry information. How is there going to be weather influences of people using more or less chlorine in a particular area? The other thing we want to do is we want to eventually look at the equipment, right? The holy trinity of water chemistry management is the chemistry, the pH, the free chlorine, the alkalinity. There is circulation. You have to circulate your water, and you have to filter it, right? Filtration, circulation, and chemistry are the 3 major things you need to look at when you're managing pool chemistry. And so we're only doing 1/3 of it right now. We know that. And part of the tech team and the R&D team is going to be very closely shifting their energy towards looking at the equipment pad, the pump, and the filter in the very near future. Naturally, service techs are our friend. We very much want to use the technology to help everybody in the industry be smarter, be better, be faster. Our goal is not to replace anybody in the industry, but make everybody more better at doing their jobs. That's why we built the technology that we have. Now, if you're a service technician, you could have 100 Sutros floating in your 100 pools on your route with 100 homes. And all of that can be shown up on a dashboard that you can see exactly which pools you need to target, which ones you need to go to first from a chemical standpoint. And naturally, you'd go and touch every home anyways, because if you're skimming the leaves, cleaning the backyard, you need to do that anyways. The fifth piece here is the weather. We want to eventually build predictive analytics in Sutro versus reactive. The way that the industry is built today is you're constantly chasing your chemistry, right? You have this big yo-yo effect of, oh, I checked my pool last Sunday, the chlorine dipped because it was 100 degrees, and crap, I need to go check it again. You're always playing catch up, right? We don't want to stop this game of catch up and be able to tell you what you need to do based off of information that we now know in the future. We want the future to predict what we're going to do today. And so part of understanding what the weather does is actually having 7-day weather forecasts and then drawing probabilities of that weather and forecasting them, backwards forecasting them on what you should do today to make sure that you don't have these big hiccups that you're going to have next weekend. Chemical OEMs, we want to allow you to use the chemicals that you are familiar with. We are not here to take business from pool stores. We want you to go back to the pool store. We want you to go back to what you're comfortable with and what type of chemicals you're comfortable in putting into your pool. And that's why we have a complete open ecosystem. We take all barcodes, and if your barcode's not in our system, please contact us. We would love to get it inside there. We have over 2,500 or 3,000 barcodes in the system right now. If you scan them, it'll pull up that particular chemical, whether you're buying it at a Leslie's, you're buying from Hasa, you're buying from Clorox BioGuard, you're buying from a Home Depot, you're buying from a Walmart. We have all these UPCs inside there, and we can tell you exactly what to use and how much to use of that chemical. The smart home, we are a smart technology. People expect that anything that they buy today needs to act and feel the same way that it would if you buy an Amazon Alexa, the same way that it would feel if you buy a Google Chromecast. These needs to have the same experiences, and I think a lot of the technology that exists out in the kind of pool and spa space today is just inferior. It's what they call as UX and UI, the user experience and user interface is just not sexy, right? You talk to users that have automation systems for their backyard and they're like, yeah, it kind of works because it's okay, and it kind of gets the job done, but they're not passionate about it, right? It's not like, oh, I love using this thing the same way that I hop on my TV and hit my Netflix and there's a show playing on there, right? Launch in with my Spotify, my music is playing on my Alexa, right? You want this seamless sort of experience, and Sutro is going to work with that. And we're speaking to the biggest smart home players out there currently to make sure that we have integrations. And lastly is the pool store. The bread and butter of kind of where I grew up, where I come from. We want the Sutro to be a fishing line, right? There's a reason that all of these things are linked to the pool owner, because the pool store should have a fishing line back to their end user. They should be smarter and better equipped that when Joe, the pool owner, comes walking in and he comes to my counter, I can pull up his information, see what's been happening in his pool over the course of the last week to be smarter and better in informing him what he should do. Because what do? I'm the pool manager. I want to sell him these chemicals so that he goes home happy and he can make sure that he's actually better treating his pool so that his water's safe for him, his friends, and his family. That's the main goal of what we're trying to build. And so what have we built with this ecosystem currently today? As Jim mentioned in the beginning, Sutro's entire philosophy is that technology is a conversation. The way that we look at building technology is not just a one and done thing. It's meant to evolve over time. When you look at the iPhone 3G, it's very different than what the iPhone 10 and iPhone 12 is. Technology companies are here to make our lives easier. They're here to make sure that everybody can work better, faster, and harder, and everybody can make more money from the things that they're doing. And that's the same ethos that we have with Sutro. So what have we built today? What I'm going to call version 1 is you have the Sutro monitor that I'm seeing showing here on the screen. What we've linked together is this thing called the Spin Doctor. And the Spin Doctor basically is a portal for pool stores to take their existing Lamont Spin Touch and link it with Sutro data. So if you see over here on the screen, Jim is actually holding that up. We have an integration with the Lamont Spin Touch with this dock that actually takes the information from a Spin Touch and pairs it with that customer information of that user that walks into their pool store that has the Sutro that's floating inside their swimming pool. So now they can literally have a fishing line between their pool store and the pool that the user is coming in from to really understand that bilateral information of what's happening at the pool and what's this water sample of the full 21-point checkup that the Lamont Spin Touch can do. And the last piece of our ecosystem is a tool that aggregates multiple Sutros for pool service technicians. So if you're out there in the field and you're running your routes, you have 100 pools, you can have 100 Sutros deployed. You can use the Sutro Pro application to log all of your actual Sutros inside there and see what the kind of problematic pools are and which ones you should be prioritizing. And so this is kind of the Sutro ecosystem, and all of this compares together with what you know best, again, which is the test kit, right? Our entire crux of our technology is based on the test kit. We do not do ORP, we do not do pH. We tried doing that 5 years ago. It does not work. It needs to be calibrated. We had a bunch of returns come back from that technology. So we went back to the drawing board, brought back the technology with the tried and true methodology of reagent-based testing, and that's what's inside the Sutro. And if you want to compare it against a test strip, a test kit, and you want to put that data inside there, we allow seamless transferability of all this data so that you don't have to be linked to just the Sutro. You can actually have a full conversation with your pool service technicians, with the pool stores, with the Sutro, with your test kit. So with that, I'll actually stop sharing my screen. And if there's any questions or you have anything else, Lauren, I'm more than happy to answer them. I think you're muted, Lauren.
I had one question from Facebook Messenger, and it had to do with getting technical about how far down you collect your water samples. So it obtains a sample 13 inches down. So they said, why do you feel that the readings obtained by only 13 inches down are valid when the industry as a whole recommends a minimum of 18 inches, which is elbow depth? So that was one question I got.
Yeah, elbow depth, right? That's an elbow right here. So that's exactly the length that we actually collected at.
Yeah,
so
and I know they were getting technical because certified pool operator course does teach 18 inches down for public pool technicians.
To that analysis, right? You need to be at elbow depth. We have actually designed the Sutro to literally be just about at elbow depth.
And then they asked, what makes this equipment better or different than other ones that are out there?
I mean, my entire first half of the presentation of most of the technologies that are out there are ORP and pH based. And so the only other company that I know that's actually doing a reagent based spectrophotometer is Water Guru. And so I think that their technology is really interesting to look at. I think anybody that's touching photospectroscopy, anybody that's touching colorimetry, if you look at all of the things that the industry looks at as being accurate, right? The Lamont Spin Touch, you look at the ETS sensor, you look at the color Q, you look at everything that the big guys are selling, Lamont, Taylor, ITS, ETS. They sell photospectrometers, right? They sell a reagent-based method that uses color to measure actually what the output of the chemistry is. And so anything else that's not that is on the other side of the building. We want to be at the people that use reagents. We want to be at the people that use spectroscopy with colorimetry. That is the corner of the room that we're in. Everybody else, if you're reading a millivolt and MV for fractional chlorine, I don't think you're even cutting it in the game.
And then I had my questions, had a couple. So I know that right now you're more in that residential pool market, and I know we've talked about this already. Moving eventually, are you looking to move into the commercial pool market down the road?
Yeah, very much so. We do actually want to get so one of the problems, I'm going to put our problems out there first, is that we don't have an inline monitor today. So the next steps of going into commercial is you can't have something floating around. We get that, we understand it, we know it. And part of what we're going to do is actually build an inline sensor so that we can take our first step towards commercial. Secondarily, a lot of the regulations make the users or the lifeguards or people that are still measuring the pool chemistry. If you look at the Model Aquatic Health Code, right, they say that you need to have a DPD-based method for the most part to measure your chlorine. You can have an automatic sensor out there, but if it's still ORP, they require you to take a DPD measurement. And so part of what we're going to do is actually apply for NSF and ANSI certification so that we can truly be certified to actually be out in the market. And the only way that you can get the NSF or ANSI certification is by having a reagent DPD-based test methodology.
Yep. And then it fits the problem with having the inline sensor you're working on, which would be kind of working similar to ORP, pulling water from where it pulls from and then analyzing the water. But instead of testing millivolt level, it's testing ppm directly with a DPD test.
Testing true ppm as free chlorine, correct? Yeah.
And then it would be able to send that information back to like a cloud-based system or whatever.
Yep, so the exact same ecosystem that I mentioned, just pull the device out of the pool and put it inside the line. The same thing holds.
Yep. So it would be basically if the health department wanted to see their log. I know there's one ORP controller that has that kind of cloud-based system. It does ppm, millivolt, and pH. It doesn't test anything else. And it's cloud-based. And so what they've done for the inspector to have access to the log is they have a little QR code for that pool. And they put it on the equipment area, and then the inspector can take their phone with their camera and they put it up, and then it'll take them to the website and they can view whatever they need to see. And then it removes having to have a physical log, a paper log that gets water damage, ripped all the time, all that kind of stuff when it's a physical log there. So this is cool because this is to highlight to all the pool operators that follow me on social media and that kind of thing, that where technology is, and just make you aware of where we are with things and where things are moving forward to down the road, so that they know maybe it can't be used on public pools now, and then you got to kind of look state by state or county or city on what their regulations are. Because I know some of them still want manual testing. They're still stuck in that manual testing world, Yeah,
and if you go back to the root of why they require manual testing, it's again, right? Just if we ask why, right? Why does a state require that you still manually test? Well, it's because a technology hasn't existed today that can still trump the reagent test kit. Well, why do you need to use a reagent test kit? Well, because DPD chlorine-based readings are the best way to actually measure chlorine content inside the water. Why is DPD the best way to do that? Because it's a tried and true method that we've used for the last 100 years. Why is that so? Well, because this is how the technology has grown over time. And so if you fast forward that and you say, well, Sutro uses a DPD-based method, you end up in the exact same storyline that allows us to have a conversation with these actual regulators to say, we are a DPD-based method because you've asked why 5 times. We understand that DPD is the way to do this. That now we can basically talk the same language. Whereas if you come at it from ORP, they'll go back to, well, why do you use DPD? Well, because we want a ppm. Well, we have millivolt. Okay, now the conversation breaks down, right? Now you can't go to that next step. And so that's why ORP doesn't work in commercial settings. And if they do, they still require that backbone for you to manually measure your pool chemistry.
I've got a good question in the back of my head now, and it's about the testing. So we all know that there's test kit interferences. How does Sutro handle the test kit interferences, which most of them are high chlorine? So like if you have a high chlorine content, how do you handle that with the chlorine test, with dilution or whatever? How high is it read on the chlorine test? How do you handle the high chlorine content affecting the phenol red and the pH test? or even the high chlorine content that, affects the alkalinity test. And so the manual test, you have to end up doing like the extra drop or whatever, or the thiosulfate. So does it do that? And how does it know how to do that?
Correct. It does know how to do that because it does that in the cloud. So the Sutro AI, what we call Sutro Artificial Intelligence, the algorithm is constantly looking at this because we're measuring 3 times a day, right? So whereas you might measure once a week, we're doing 21 times more measurements than you're doing currently in the household setting. And so all of that data plus the ability to know what the inflection point is around the ceiling allows us to then reset what we should be seeing for pH or should be seeing for alkalinity to where we can basically draw an error state and say, hey, look, this chlorine is just really, really high. It could affect the pH. It could affect the alkalinity. You might need to look at this because this could be potentially a problem.
Does it do, like when it does the test for pH, does it do that, like drop a thiosulfate when it does its test and then redo the test? If it
won't redo the test right now. It'll just pull up an error state. But part of what our chemistry team is working on is actually to be able to include reagents like that. So we can, the beautiful thing about our system is, as you notice, there's 5 syringes inside there, right? Mm-hmm. You can pull one out and put another one inside. And as long as we know what's in those cartridges, we can begin to build a different matrix of tests to allow us to do the things that you're saying. And in the future, we could maybe do a cyanuric acid test. We could maybe do a total chlorine test. We could maybe do an OTO test. And that's kind of where the power of Sutro really starts to push itself forward, is when we start putting in more reagents inside of those reagent cartridges.
So basically it'll give you the warnings that there might be a test kit interference. And then at that point you see the Sutro warnings, then you should pull out your manual test, like any of the pull test kits out there, and follow the directions for the test kit interference. So if it's the extra drop of thiosulfate at the beginning of your pH test. So right now, and that answered my question. So the Sutro doesn't actually able to handle directly like test kit interferences on its own. It just gives that an error message that indicates there could be a test kit interference going on. Still pull out your manual pull test kit in order to figure out, what's going on and how to get around that test kit interference, and then get your true level of alkalinity or pH at that point.
Correct. This is actually a really interesting point, because the fact that we're able to even have this discussion means that Sutro as a technology has leveled up the game. Because if you're talking to anybody that makes an ORP sensor, they would outright not even be able to have a reagent-based discussion with you. Right. And so to the question of somebody that was asking, how do we compare against the other folks out there? This is how. This is the ability to have these discussions, build the technology, and grow it to the next stage.
And like you said, you're not trying to make it replace, right? It's not replacing anybody. And it's not replacing, you're not saying replacing manual testing either. You just got more, what you're saying is we're adding more data to the log sheet, or wherever you're keeping your info on your computer, your laptop, your phone. It's more data to look at, but you're not saying completely get rid of your pool test kit for the pool guys in the pool stores. You're saying still use that, still do your daily testing. This is just to add more to help you manage your water chemistry.
Correct. Yep.
More info is great. More info is awesome. I know some people get a little scared or nervous when they think that maybe something like this is going to overtake and replace the manual testing completely. And I think that in the commercial pool world, that's going to be a public pools. That's going to be a real hard thing to sell to the public health agencies. They're going to love that there's something extra, giving more data that the health inspector can look at, that the pool tech can look at, but they still like having a person testing it. I think I've gotten that just from down here being in Florida. So
sure. Yep.
But very neat to highlight, and it sounds cool. Sounds like you guys are working toward it being able to basically handle everything that a manual test might be able to do, even with test kit interferences. It's just figuring out the technology and the AI to be able to handle all that.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you think about it, pumping really, really small amounts of reagents that are in this chip That's difficult, right?
Yep.
Doing really, really small types of chemistry is, we literally have a laboratory on a chip that's
Yep.
floating inside your chemical.
I think the technology is there, though. I think you guys will get there eventually. I mean, the technology is amazing in every part of the world. I think that it's completely possible. And if you're really, you and only one other is really using the, you know, reagent based testing like this, there's you and the other one you mentioned, then, you know, you guys kind of have that extra step there forward, you know? So,
Yeah.
and it's always love to do trainings like this because I like the pool operators to know what's out there. If they hear the name Sutro, what is it? What does it do? Now they can come to the YouTube training video or the Facebook live video and they can go, okay, that's what it is. You know, if they've seen you on somewhere, and it's to just, I want to make sure pool operators are aware of what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what are the capabilities, and hear it straight from the company instead of hearing it from somebody else that could be a competitor or anything else that's going to try to make it sound differently, you know?
Yep,
So
yep, definitely.
it's putting that information out there. Well, do you guys have anything else to add, Jim, Ravi? I don't have any other questions from anybody else at this point.
Nope, that's it from my side. But if you have anybody else that does reach out for a question, you know where to find us.
Can you
We're
give
more
your
than happy.
contact info on here so anybody watches the recording later will be able to contact you?
Yeah, sure. So if you want to find out more information, just go to mysutro.com. That's mysutro.com. And if you have any questions at all, you can just hit our support line. We also have a telephone number that's out there. If you go to the contact us page at the bottom of the Sutro website, you'll find it. But support@mysutro.com will get us into our support center. And we will definitely see your question. We will answer it and we will get back to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on today, guys.
Yep. Thank you for having us, Lauren.
No problem.
All right.